Hello and welcome back to the Straight Line Path podcast. I'm joined here with my co-host Peter. In this episode, we chatted with John Canniffe. John Canniffe is based out in the US. He's a mergers and acquisitions expert and has a consultant company that helps founders and owners develop their perfect exit strategy for them and their business.
This is a must-watch for anybody who's interested in M&As or buying and selling businesses in general. John breaks down everything that runs through a buyer and seller's head and what are the things that they overlook. All of this and much more. We hope you enjoy.
Hey John, welcome to the Straight Line Path podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
So it sounds like an obvious question, this one, but in your own words, why should a founder care about their own exit strategy?
Yeah, they should care because if you don't consciously work on your company and work towards thinking about your business like a buyer would, you're going to have to do it at the end. So you might as well prepare as soon as you possibly can if you want to sell your business. And in other words, a buyer is looking at businesses differently than an operator. A buyer is looking at taking over the business from the founder and the entrepreneur, so that he or she can run it. So when she comes in and buys your business or looks at your business, there's going to be things that come up in due diligence that if you can take care of before you get an offer, you should do that, right? You should have your business ready for sale whenever you get an offer.
Okay. And then, John, let's say we've got a new entrepreneur. They're just beginning. What's some of the things they should be doing from day one to set them up to have a good exit strategy?
Yeah, great question. We find when we're dealing with entrepreneurs, the most common one is they believe that and they need to do the things to build their business up. They need to be the chief sales officer. They need to be the chief financial officer, oftentimes because they're the only thing, but they're the only person there, or they're the founding person. But that becomes an impediment to sale because um, if the business requires them to sell, if they're responsible for 40% of the sales, as an example, well, that's going to be a problem for the buyer, right? So the most important thing is removing yourself from the day to day and being the person that removes roadblocks for others and helping everyone else do their job. So you're a leader. We think of it when we talk to founders about hovering above the business, so they're not actually responsible for anything day to day. They are working on the business as a product.
Yeah. Uh, and in your opinion, because obviously, the founder is working in the business, especially in the beginning, and it can be quite difficult to pull themselves out. Is there a certain time frame or a certain trigger that you would say or you would advise for that founder or that owner to start pulling themselves out? Like, when would be the perfect time?
Yeah, good question. There can be a revenue component to it. Like, we've found that when you get to 5 million US dollars in sales is a critical piece or critical point, because oftentimes what founders do, and the founders that we counsel and we deal with, they're adding a Saturday or Sunday, right? And once you're working 7 days a week, I don't know if you guys know, but there's no eighth day of the week, right? There's no other day that you can pull out and you can work a Saturday night and you can work a Sunday night, sure, but you can't do all those things. So that's one component of it. If it's a revenue component, and then the second part of it is when you when the business is so dependent on you that you can't take a weekend off or a couple days off. So those are the critical components. But 5 million seems to be the place where the owner and the founder is sort of constrained by simply time, that they need to sort of step back and hire those discrete people that can do the sales, marketing, and finance other than themselves.
Yeah. And so say, for example, there is, that owner that gets to, 5 million a year and they're very time constrained. They're working weekends. What are maybe the first steps that they can do to start removing themselves? Like, I'm sure it's a little bit more complex as to just hire more staff. There's other things that go into
Yeah,
it, right?
A lot of times what we find is when founders gravitate towards the things that they like to do or they feel comfortable doing,
Mm.
right? If you're a founder and you're doing all the sales and you're a natural sales person, you'll gravitate towards the sales component because you're good at it. So what we recommend founders do is write down what they're doing for a week or 2 weeks. How, what during the day, how many hours of the day are they doing a certain thing, whether it's finance, whether it's your books, your finance, your marketing, managing people, and whatever's taking up a lot of your day and whatever's taking a lot of your time is look to hire not necessarily a full-time person. There's all sorts of fractional options that exist. We work with a couple of fractional chief financial officers that come in and they can do 2 hours a week. They can do 2 hours a month. They can do 4 hours. They're very flexible. And same things with sales. We find that we're often brought in to do a couple of things: raise money for people because they want some working capital, or they want additional sales. And everyone wants additional sales, but it's much easier said than done. So if you find yourself doing these activities, you're going to want to remove yourself from doing those activities. And typically it's finance and it's sales. You can bring in a sales pod for, a relatively small amount of money. And there's tons of people out there with exceptional skills that can help you.
And I wonder off that, John, is there any companies you would say that they're almost unsellable, that the owner is too tired and they can't pull away? Have you come across that?
Yeah, lifestyle businesses, right? So businesses where, and I frankly grew up in one. It's a business where the owner is comfortable making $250,000 a year. They have a company car. They work 4 hours a week, and they've created their lifestyle. They've wrapped their lifestyle around the business. And when we go in and we help them and we can alter the financials, right? They're running their business on QuickBooks, which like everyone else does, but they're not showing any profit, right? Because they're in the United States, they're running their business for tax purposes, so that they don't show any profitability on the tax side, so their taxes are low. And they have everything. Their life and their business is sort of wrapped up in each other, and you can't really tell where one starts and one stops. So we can counsel these people and help them if they want to sell their business, but in reality, the in practice, I should say, when we've talked to them, it's they don't really want to sell their business because their lifestyle would be so interrupted by selling, and it is unsellable because they could be in my example, they could be the candy maker, they could be the one that runs the business, they could be the one that the landlord in a real estate business, they could be the one that's doing those things. So the buyer comes in and is like, I don't really want a profit. I mean, a lifestyle business. I want a profit making entity that I can grow and scale. So lifestyle businesses are one of them. And then any business that's like way too dependent on the owner, that the founder is doing a lot of things, are just unattractive to typical buyers unless they want to come in and do the same things that the seller is doing, and that's very rare. We haven't had that experience yet.
Hmm. And and oftentimes we put all of this focus on the entrepreneur who's selling, the business owner. How important is it then to also look at who's buying this company and how's that going to work, culturally with this company they're taking on, especially if it's one of them scenarios where maybe it has been a bit of a lifestyle, now he's pulled back, he's got ready for a sale. How important is the buyer in that scenario?
Yeah, the buyer is really important in that scenario because the buyer is going to. I mean, it's like your annual physical with your doctor, right? You're going to give blood work. You're going to go in for a physical exam. He's going to take your blood pressure. He's going to take your weight, and that's essentially what a buyer is doing to the seller. They're going through due diligence. They're gathering all sorts of information, and the buyer is going to know the business, or the buyer is going to have a perception of the business that is probably different from the seller, right? They're gonna see risks in different spots than the seller. But it's critical for the buyer to understand where they want to take the business. And sometimes they're not transparent with the seller about what they want to do with the business, right? As an example, roofing companies in the United States, and like plumbing companies, and those types of businesses have been very attractive to private equity over the last couple of years because um, they can roll them up into a roll up situation where they roll up all the roofing companies in the Midwest that have that receive more than 50% of their revenue from insurance claims. And like, so it's basically like sort of like storm chasing. So if the buyer has that in mind, then he or she may not really care the nature of the business if it's a lifestyle business, because they're going to consolidate the financials at a central office. They're going to consolidate sales at a central office, and all they really need are labor and office people to run the offices in the place they go. So it's really critical to understand and to communicate from the sell side as well as the buy side about what you're going to do with the business, because then a lifestyle business or a business that may not be attractive to an owner operator, because they want to run it as a profit making business, maybe sort of the perfect fit for somebody who's part of a roll up situation, because then they can be an absentee owner. They can just sell the business and get a smaller piece of a larger pie. So and that focuses on like really like the importance of communication. And oftentimes we see this break down because everyone's trying to hold their card so close to the vest, that if they haven't asked about it in due diligence, then they're like, okay, well, they don't care. If they didn't ask me about it in due diligence, um, then it's set, then it's fine. I don't need to disclose it. And that's just not the
Which
case.
is not the case. Yeah, yeah. And that's really interesting. I think you answered a couple questions I had in my head there. But even from the buyer's perspective, when looking at a company, because this is also important for the seller, right? They want to know what's in the buyer's head so they can prepare, right? What are the kind of things that the buyer is looking at maybe on initial glance, like, and is there anything that they maybe frown upon, from the seller's perspective as well?
Yeah, what they can frown upon, what they frown upon is sort of excess compensation, right? So there can be, oftentimes in these smaller businesses, one salesperson can be responsible for 75% of the sales,
Mm.
and that's fine, right? That's just a risk, that the buyer is going to take on. And what happens if she leaves, right? If she's responsible for 75% of the sales, well, she's a critical key man risk is what we call it in the United States. I'm not sure what we call it overseas, but key man risk. Okay, whether it's the CFO or the CSO, so that's something that the buyer is concerned with. Revenue concentration, right? So if one customer is north of, let's call it 35 to 40%, oftentimes the buyers will discount the revenue that comes from that client. And so if you have a business that's $1 million in EBITDA, and you have to discount some of that revenue, then the seller is going to not get the multiple that they think they're going to get in the sale. um, Financials are obviously a key if they're not concerned with, if they're not really managing their costs. Like we had a situation where a manufacturer, their cost of goods sold was really high related to their revenue, and it was one of those things. It was a structural problem because they didn't adequately build up their supply chain. So they were sourcing things from only one or two or three vendors. So and then obviously the profit margin, right? Where their operational costs sit. What are they doing for advertising, right? Are they altering their financials, or have they altered their financials in the last year to make themselves look better? And we see this a lot in that people think that it's like when you're buying a house and you have to get a down payment, all of a sudden $50,000 shows up in your account. Well, the bank's going to find that out. If all of a sudden your advertising expenses are, 9% of revenue, as an example, in 2023 and 2024, all of a sudden in 2025 they go to 2. Well, that's going to have an impact on sales, and it's not really a true picture of the business as it exists, because you're juicing the numbers and making it look like it's a better company than it is, or you're giving tons of discounts. So I guess it was more than one, but those are the things that we look at, and when we see those things, it's like, all right, those are sort of red flags that the buyer is going to point out, and we counsel our clients to actively mention like, hey, we do have
Yeah.
this client that's 35%, or we did cut down our advertising and this is the reason why. And as long as there's an explanation and you're upfront, most buyers are understanding, and they sort of take that into account with their offer.
Absolutely. And just out of curiosity, does that happen quite a bit in terms of, sellers choosing the numbers to make it paint a different picture?
I don't want to say it happens all the time, but it does happen in the sense of people, because, and this usually happens before they come to us because we recommend they don't do
Yeah.
that. Um, but it does happen because people have a perception of what people have a perception that the profit margin is the most important part. And profit, don't get me wrong, profits are very important. Revenues are important too, but the character of the seller comes through in their actions, right? The character of the seller comes through in how they run their business, and how and the business is, the financials are a reflection of how the business runs in real time. So when they're doing these things, we counsel them to like, look, like, just make it, there's ways you can do this where you're not going to cause red flags, or you're not going to cause, you're not going to, you don't have to make an explanation. It's like, hey, these are the financials of the business. We had a down quarter because of X, Y, and Z. People understand that. When you have something that's not explained and it's very clear in the financials, that's when buyers are like, you know what, I have enough. There's other options in the other fish in the sea, so to speak. I will take my chances with them.
Mm. And outside of the financials, because I know a lot of the time there can be so much pressure placed on these financial, and like you said, they can be, played around with, juiced up, made to look better. Is there's other things that the buyers really should not be overlooking, and that you've seen them overlook in your experience?
That I've seen them overlook. I mean, frankly, most of the buyers we're dealing with are very sophisticated, so I can't say that they overlook things. I think they underemphasize things, and again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but coming back to what the owner's doing, um, uh, I think that's one thing that sometimes is underemphasized. They think that they're going to be with them for an earnout period, as an example, and they can do a transition. But really, what we've seen is, you know, uh, buyers want to have that risk sort of tied up. Yeah, revenue concentration is another one that sometimes is, if you lose 30% of your revenue, that can really affect the valuation. So we've seen sometimes that come up in deals like, not guaranteeing that the client stays with them, but discounts based on, revenue that's not achieved in earnout periods becomes money that the owner doesn't get if they don't keep them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One thing I kind of want to talk about is the landscape of acquisitions in the states now. You mentioned, private equity companies are finding the kind of trades companies quite attractive, plumbing, roofing, and then consolidating them up. Is there any other sort of trends, or like how do you see that landscape, the buying landscape in the states changing over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, the AI boom and the AI, using AI to either augment existing positions or replace positions is sort of a huge trend we're seeing. We have a couple of AI clients and sort of potential clients that are doing this, but that is sort of overarching in everything, right?
Right.
It's if you're not using AI, let's put it that way, AI is going to be used upon you, or to you. So I see that as just a trend and there's two different sort of flavors. One, as I mentioned, is making your current employees more effective with AI, which I think is the way that people will win. I don't think I don't think AI will it will replace people, replace jobs, but I don't think AI will be the great replacer of jobs in this country, at least not in the near future, because there's AI is great for refining an email or those things, but it's not really good at doing physical tasks in the real world. And if you think of my job, like I'm online all the time. But I don't think AI will be replacing me anytime soon. Hopefully this isn't used, as a in the near future of like, hey, look, John got
Yeah.
replaced. But that's a trend. And then SaaS, right? The SaaS sort of model is being influenced by AI
Yeah.
in the sense of how many companies, like how many software companies will be needed if I can generate, if I can have a system, if I can have a customer database created by AI and managed by me. Do I really need a an ERP or other systems? I think that's at its infancy. We're seeing and we're talking to people that really view AI as a potential software killer, which is interesting because of the way that software sort of eaten the world in the last 10 years. I wonder if AI will eat software in the near future.
And just curious on the AI and technology front, how does that factor into an owner's exit strategy, right? Because obviously the company is tech enabled, AI enabled. I'm sure that has an influence on a buyer's perspective and then the valuation as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are. What we found is people are using AI. It's almost like when they were Google me in the past, right? You Google your own name. We found people that are Googling their company name and Googling their website or sorry, using AI, excuse me, to assess their information, throwing in their financials into AI and saying, hey, is my company, who could I sell my company to? This is what I do. And we've had a couple of people do that. And it comes back with like wildly poor answers because AI doesn't quite it's good at what we found is it's not great at synthesizing all that information together. So I would say that you can use it up to a degree to analyze, things like, hey, if my we have one client that my revenue concentration, or we have one client that's 50% of my revenue. Is that going to be bad when I go to sell my business? Like, yes. I'm working 80 hours a week. Is this going to be bad for selling my business? Yes. I don't have a CFO, or I'm doing cash accounting instead of accrual accounting. So that's how I'm seeing that people use AI to say, ask specific questions. And then we see burnout. Like burnout is like one of the biggest things where we get clients is, again, they get to the point where they're working Saturday, they're working Sunday, and they put into the web or AI that, man, I'm burned out. Who can buy my business from me? And they're coming to people like Joe and I to help them because they just, again, they can't add an eighth day to the week.
Hmm. And I'm interested about the fact because we've heard all of this about AI and how these are the hottest thing right now at the minute, and everybody wants to buy in. But then you tell me private equity firms are buying up plumbing companies, roofing companies in the Midwest. Have the business deals you've seen actually been the opposite of what we're being told in the market? So, like that, are private equity firms still? Is there still a premium going for these more blue collar jobs, AI proof jobs?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that there are because when you have a pipe leak or you have a heating problem or you have something that you need to get done, as far as I know, AI can't solve that problem, right? So what I think that they're doing is they're grasping and they're going for where they can, really find some value. And what they're finding is that dentist office, roofing companies, plumbing companies, those types of companies can be centralized at a central location, right? So they can be centralized in Kansas City, as an example. There's one company, it was either Kansas City or Oklahoma City, that was a roofing company. And what I think some investors are gravitating towards is they purchased a company, right? They purchased a company with great technology and in this space, or they have a technologist founder that is going to be the CEO of the company, and they are looking at scale, right? They're looking at ways that they can scale centrally with the things that can be centralized. And I think they're thinking really smartly about it in the sense of, a roofing company or a plumbing company. There's no reason why they can't have a call center in the spine of the country, right? The United States built all sorts of for defense purposes and for up the spine of our country is an incredible fiber optic network, and so they have wonderful high speed internet in some of these places in Iowa and Oklahoma, and it's cheaper than having things on the coasts, and they can run the business from there without much of a problem. So yeah, I think some of them, and also it's what they don't understand, right? And frankly, I'll put myself in that camp of, if they can understand roofing, and they can understand dentists, and it's people, it's scaling things across the world, it's scaling across the country. They can understand how to run that business, whereas AI is still sort of fledgling. And if you're in the physical world and you understand that and you know that, then there's I think there's easier pieces to put together for a successful business.
Yeah. I'm pulling back to your expertise, which is helping founders get the most of their out of their exit. Is there, say, let's take an owner for an example, hypothetical situation. They're looking to sell their business. They're maybe burnt out, as you mentioned. Is there a test or is a litmus test to determine how saleable their business is
Yeah.
now and what they can do to get the most and improve on that?
That's a great question. And yeah, we've developed what we call our total exit value system. And what we do is the first thing that we do with a client or potential client is we have them take this assessment.
Mhm.
And the result of the assessment gives them scores in 12 areas. And it's some of the ones we spoke about. It's finances, it's operations, it's marketing, it's client concentration. But some of the other ones are, what are your personal goals, right? What do you want to achieve from this business? So when we have them take the assessment, some of the questions make sense, right? What are your sales? What is your profit margin? Some of the sales they sort of kind of understand with, like, how much are you in the business? Like, can you take a week off? But then some of them are, what do you want from the business, right? Like, what's your personal goal? Because if their personal goal is, I want to walk away with $4 million after the sale of my business, and I want to walk away clean in 3 years, or I don't want to have an earnout, then those are the types of questions we want to know, so we can help them adjust that. And if they have to know that, right? A lot of the questions are something that we help them with, right? We can help them with sourcing new vendors. We can help them with a sales pod. We can help them with a chief financial officer, but we can't really help them with what they want from this business. So if they really want $6 million, like, well, Aaron, Peter, we can help you get $6 million. It's going to take you 3 more years to do it, and you've come to me with burnout. So what we can do is, maybe we can adjust your goals down, make this the second to last business you have, provide you with money for your next business, because a lot of the entrepreneurs we work with are serial entrepreneurs, and they want the next thing. They want to move on from this business and buy their next business. So a lot of them is just helping them understand what their goals are, and then what the business can provide to help them achieve those goals.
Yeah. And from your experience then with that as well, have you seen a trend or maybe a pattern on where these deals fall short? Or does it lie on the buyer side when they're doing due diligence, or is it more the seller side and them not being really clear on what they actually want?
I think it's a combination of both. I think a lot of the time, the deal structure from the buy side can be a problem, right? So if you have a business, and the owner, or the buyer has determined that there's owner risk there, in the sense of, if we sign this deal and she walks away and she's no longer here doing the things that she was doing, then the business will fall apart. That's a big problem. And also earnouts, right? So earnouts, once the transfer of the ownership, and let's most of the time in the States, we sell assets, we don't sell the whole corporation. So
Okay.
they're selling the assets of the company, and there's some type of contractual agreement where the owner sticks around for a period of time, and is either there as a guidepost, or as an advisor, or something along those lines. The buyer Oftentimes buyers resist those types of deals, and want sort of to be clean out, or don't want any of the purchase price to be contingent upon something that they can't control. And the perception is, when they're no longer the CEO, then they can't control that.
Mm.
So that's from sort of the buy side and how the seller reacts to it. And then we oftentimes see things where um, the seller didn't address a couple of things. Like, right, we talked about things, we worked with them on projects, and the solution, frankly, and sometimes the solution doesn't work, right? We bring in a sales pod that's external, and the buyer doesn't like that. So it can be finding the right buyer for this. So I agree. We talked earlier in the podcast about identifying the right buyer and what they want to do with the business. So oftentimes when we know that, and we go through like a round with them of like a buyer coming to them saying, "Hey, I want you to make part of I want you to be part of a roll up, and you're a huge roofing company in Southern Mississippi, and we want you to be part of this national chain." Great. That can help sort of focus what the seller needs to do in the next 90, 180 days before that transaction happens.
And just a quick one for you then. What would be something that would just make your life so much easier when somebody came to you to sell a business, that there's something that almost nobody has ready to go that you would love?
Standard operating procedures. And it sounds terrible, like just saying the word, because I remember developed them for one of my prior jobs, and it sounds so boring. And it's not something that can be corrected overnight. It's like revenue concentration. Like, yeah, I'd like you to say no to your biggest client, or what are you going to do? Say no to your biggest client? Okay, that's not something you can control. It's someone else. What you can do today is write down, or even better, assign somebody. There's usually a person at the business who is so critical to the business, they don't get the recognition for it. It can be a director of operations. It can be a director of finance. It can be it's usually somebody who is very detail oriented, who's often overlooked. But the thought of running the business without Paul or Joe or Sally or whoever it is impossible to the owner. And they know things, they know the owner's schedule, they know the clients. They may not be they're probably not the salesperson, but they're the person that can critically run or can critically assess the business. Those people are oftentimes the best person to put together a standard operating procedure. And what I mean by a standard operating procedure is how you make the donuts, right? The dough, and I should know more about donuts, but I don't. The dough comes in from the supplier. They're so good. I don't eat them, but they're so good. My daughters eat them. But they're like, the dough comes in from the vendor, and Dan takes the dough and does this, and then Mark does this, and Paula does this, and having that written down, and have someone and that person to be responsible for, why do we need this step? And reviewing those standard operating procedures and tasking somebody and incentivizing people to make it more simple, right? Simple things are wonderful to run because anyone can run. Like if you look at Warren Buffett, one of the biggest providers of money from his empire is See's Candy. It's a candy store. It's what I grew up in. It's a relatively simple procedure, but if you make it more simple and you write it down and you're constantly revising it and improving it, I think that's the one thing that I think would counsel people to say. It can't be in the owner's head. It can't be in Dan's head. It's got to be written down so that, oh, here's our standard. Here's how we run our business. And then someone can be like, wow, they're really conscious about A, having it written down, and B, consistently and constantly improving it.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm trying to like piece together a list per se of what a founder should be focusing on. So I think I've got clear financials, know the proper numbers, no messing about there, clear SOPs, really clear, structured. And the other one is obviously the founder pulling themselves out of the business, not being the one working on weekends, etc. Is there anything, I'm wondering, is there anything we're missing there?
Well, growth, like plans for the future. One of the things that I don't think we've talked about yet, if we have, then forgive me, but like a plan for the future, right? So, what we oftentimes counsel people to do, and I should say all the time we try to do this, is have a plan for the future. That if you could wave a magic wand, I love waving magic wands and saying, if I had all the money in the world, I would do X, or if I could get some more money, and could expand geographically into this county or this state, I would do it. So writing down a sort of wish list, and we call them marketable inefficiencies. And it's the thinking behind it is, I can't go to the bank and get a bigger loan because they won't give me more money. However, you as the buyer may, with access to capital, may have more access to capital, cheaper capital. We can leverage your network in a way that I can't leverage mine. So writing down a wish list of things that that can be exploited by a buyer, and buyers sort of light up when they say this, because most of the time when buyers are doing due diligence, they send an exhaustive list of a spreadsheet with 19 tabs and 15 sub questions, and they think that they can understand the company in 60 days or 30 days or whatever it happens to be. And the reality is they can't. But when you disclose something like to say, hey, Aaron, you want to buy my business? Like, I'm going to give you all the financials. I'm going to give you everything you want. And we're going to be as transparent as possible. And I'm also going to give you a list of things that we haven't been able to do because of my limitations, my team's limitations, my financial limitations. But you can take this and exploit it. You could go to Pennsylvania and there's blah, 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 blah about Pennsylvania that needs this service. Or you can go to Massachusetts or another state in the country to say, if I were you and I had unlimited capital, I would do this. And we've seen buyers just like stop in their tracks and say, I can't believe you provided what you would do. Because again, is it a secret? Yeah, I guess it's a secret, but they're going to, you want to be as transparent as possible with the buyer, that with a serious buyer. And when we found that that's a great way to do it, to sort of disclose everything and, hey, take this and do what you will with it. Maybe they do none of it. Maybe they do three of them. Maybe they do one of them. Maybe they don't do any.
Well, that's a really interesting point and something I wouldn't really have thought about, especially from the. It's interesting about the disclosure because you said it has to be a serious buyer, and I'm wondering, do you see that often at the start that the business owner, they might be very, tentative to give across information, or they might be very standoffish, and you really have to vet the buyer, vet the seller, and make sure everybody's really serious. How do you do that?
Yeah, and that's a great question. We do it a couple ways. We identify if the buyer has bought anything in the past, right? If they've purchased companies in the space before, if they've purchased any companies in the space, I look for, employees leaving on LinkedIn. I look at news stories. I look at the Wall Street Journal. I look at the New York Times and various other sources around in the States. That's one thing. And then, proof of funds, right? When you get down to it, do you have the money? Because there's a lot of companies search funds, right? They'll search for an entity and then they do things a little bit backwards, right? They find the acquisition target and then they go get the money. And that just turns into a nightmare. So what we counsel our buyers are, if they're a strategic buyer, they're in your space, they've bought 3 companies like yours in the last 10 years, great. And then when we're talking to them and the questions that they're asking, the due diligence questions, one of the red flags is that if they don't ask a lot of questions in due diligence, it's like, what what do you mean? They can ask too many questions. I sort of expect that they ask too many questions. Like, guys, we can't tell you what the business is going to be like in 2 years because we can't predict the future. If I could predict the future, I wouldn't be here doing this. I'd be, in Cabo San Lucas, betting on horses or, whatever. So whatever I'd be doing, but I wouldn't be doing this. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yep.
And you're an advisor to another company that helps with funding. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we have a capital advisory partnership that we're working on now. Is I mentioned earlier that many companies in the space that we work in, and we work from, about $1 million in revenue up to, let's call it 20 million in revenue. Those are our sweet spot. We will work with companies that are outside that, but that's sort of our sweet spot because we can have the most effect on that. And what we found is, we have a company right now that's looking to raising money right now, and they have $3.5 million in revenue. But they could always use more capital in the bank to grow and to hire things. So often what we found when we were talking to clients is we were going to small business entities and we were going to bankers, and we work with everybody. We have a bunch of small business lenders, but we wanted to have a solution where um, we could easily get their information, talk to them about applying for a loan for them, and not doing it behind their back or anything, but being like, hey, like, you want to do these growth things after you hire us, but you also let's get some capital so that if an acquisition comes along or a new adjacent market comes along, you can exploit that opportunity so that, when others are fearful, be greedy.
Mm.
And that's sort of the philosophy that we've tried to uh, make present in our clients, if you will.
Yeah,
So,
no, that makes sense. John, you're a podcaster yourself, obviously very used to asking a lot of questions. I was wondering, is there a question that you wish or you think we could have asked you during this episode that we haven't asked?
good question.
Maybe that was it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of stuff. I mean, the assessment that we have is useful. I mean, the only thing I will say, and I don't want to sound self-serving,
Oh.
is a lot of companies have no thought about selling their business, but it comes up very quickly.
Mm.
So I guess one question would be like, when is the ideal time? And maybe you did ask me this, but when is the ideal time to start thinking about selling your business? And I guess the answer is it depends, right? We talk about things that happen in life that you can't control. We talk about the 5 Ds: death, divorce, dissolution. I'm forgetting the other ones, but there's things that come up in life where you can't plan for them, right? But if they come up, you want to have a plan, right? It's better to have a plan and not use it. So we counsel people, like, even if you don't think about selling, maybe it's good just to do an assessment to see if I want to sell in a year. Maybe you're 62, maybe you're 63, maybe you're 81 and you haven't sold your business yet, but you want to get an idea of how much it's worth and how much you could sell it for. Go to myexitengine.com, take our assessment, and or contact me at John at myexitengine.com, and I can certainly walk you through the items that we do, or that we counsel people on typically.
John, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. People want to hear more of your story, more of your insights. Um, let them know that the podcast, the LinkedIn, where should they go?
Sure. Yeah, you can go to podcast.myexitengine.com. You can go to myexitengine.com. You can email me directly at john@myexitengine.com. Find me on LinkedIn. It's kind of a interesting spelling of my last name. It's actually an Irish name.
Yeah.
So it's JohnCanniffe. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm try to be there every day.
Mm.
Sometimes I'm not there, but most times.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, John.